be important, but how do we get there? How do we actually transform our relationship to know? Well, Susan was just able to one day self-speak herself and say, grow up, Susan, and it worked. I don't know, that's fabulous. I don't know that to be the case for everybody, but it's one possible strategy to take from this. Well, I also think it's physical. And what I mean by physical is you got to practice, 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 for one. And the domain that people practice all the time is in sport. And those of you who have worked with me before know that I love sports. I have since I was quite young. And while I've been a 20, 30, how many years have I been teaching? Yes, almost 29 years I've been teaching fitness classes. I still teach fitness classes in the morning. I'm also a hockey goalie. And I'm going to use that domain to talk about it being physical. Because there's something about practice and repetition and building instinct that's really important in this conversation. So that you in the moment can arrest that concern that comes up around no, and then in the moment switch to another muscle that has you be back empowered. The other piece is that, how many of you play a sport of some sort? You run something? So a majority that can relate to this analogy, and there might be something if you're a musician, it'll be the same thing. If you go intense, or are tense in the moment, guess what happens? It's like, so as a goalie, if I'm in the net like this, I am going to not be loose. I literally in the net, I'm loose, and I'm not flat-footed even in my skates. I'm kind of on my toes, which if any of you have been watching the Australian Open and our fabulous Jeannie Bouchard and her work, you'll see, I know, eh? Yay. You'll see that that girl at 19 has instinct, light, strong. But any tennis player, they're flat-footed, guess what? That ball is past them. Same thing with me as a goalie. If I'm sort of flat-footed and tense, I'm so focused on stopping the puck, I'm not loose, it's going to get right by me. So I'm really working on staying loose. So when you know you're going into an important conversation, it's important that you actually stay loose. And how do you do that? A lot of it has to do with breath. So I want to do something with you regarding breath. And there's research now about the power of music and its sort of chemical effect that it can have on you. It uplifts you. Hey, didn't take scientists to figure that out, but there's something to it. And the other part of it, which is why fitness classes are so much fun, is you get to move to the music. I have learned so much about myself as a business person and as a female business leader from being a hockey goalie. Like, I'm not nice. You don't want to be my defenseman screening me when I'm playing hockey. I mean, I got a shutout the other night, and it wasn't because I was nice, right? I did things to make sure I stopped that puck. There's some collisions. I have a big bruise here from 2 weeks ago. Like, we're playing intensely. We want to win, not at all costs, and we're a team. So your physicality going into these conversations is important. So please make a note of that, about your preparation going in. And once you do that, this is where we get to what's the breakthrough for you in embracing no in terms of the claim of this whole talk about having a breakthrough in your sales. Well, if you can be with that no, recognize the meaning you're putting on it, physically prepare yourself, be ready, then you can ask powerful questions to your clients. This comes from stage one of what I call my designer experience roadmap. And there's a number of you who have either worked with me or been in my momentum coaching group. And when I first introduced this, a lot of people say, I could never ask that question. Why would I ask that question? How could I ask that question? Wouldn't that be intrusive? It would be, but only inside of a context, a meaning of being scared of hearing the answer, or somehow thinking you shouldn't ask these kind of questions. So on that piece of paper, these 2 slides of questions are there. And I just want to review them because it goes a little bit back to what you just said about they hired you because you were funny. So you want to ask some really important questions because there's a honeymoon stage in the first couple of interactions with a potential client, and then when they say yes to you, you can ask anything. But after a while, if you start to ask questions that you should have asked back in stage 1 or stage 2, you're going to start to look a little bit like you're not on the ball. And I'm not saying not to ask them, but just be mindful that you're clear about those questions you need to ask. So I say these are some important questions to ask when, in the first part, a lead comes in. First of all, when someone calls you and wants to talk to you about business, you don't have to talk to them right away. I know it's exciting and you want to go, yes, I'll talk to you, but if you're not prepared to talk to them, you're doing yourself a disservice. Again, an athlete just doesn't randomly play hockey or do a 100-meter dash or anything to that effect. Those athletes going into the Sochi Olympics have been preparing and preparing, and the repetition and the repetition and the preparation. So it looks like they're doing it for the very first time. Figure skaters are masters at this. They've done it mazillions and mazillions of times, and then when they get on the ice, it looks like it's their first time. So if you've got good practice in this area, it'll sound like it's the first time you're asking these questions because you're doing it in such a relaxed way with such ease. Questions like, what are you looking for? Now here's an important one. How did you hear about me? And who told you about me? And not just who told you, well, Kimberly referred me. Thank you. What did Kimberly say about my coaching services that had you actually be compelled to pick up the phone? Because I want to pay special attention to that, because whatever that nugget is important when I'm talking to them about what I do. What's the timing on your project? Like, just stuff that you just need to know. It sort of gets you set up to know what your court looks like when you're playing your game. Why is that date important for you to complete this project? Oh, no reason. Remember yesterday when we were talking about fixed fees and this whole idea of find out why. Like, why is that important? Don't just take it for face value. So no is a very important conversation, by the way, regardless of whether you take fixed fees or not. It's so important during your initial stages of your relationship to be seeking out to be able to hear that if something doesn't work. Have you worked with a designer before? What did you like? And why aren't you working with them again? So it's not just about what you didn't like. Oh, good, they're not going to work with that person. Well, what didn't work? And you might go, oh, that sounds like a bit of a pitfall. You didn't like that, but that's very important. I see why that designer got fired. There's some good reasons. Why do you think you need a designer for the project? They may have no clue. And that's an opportunity for you to share more of your value. Are you interviewing other designers? Again, just an overview. This one I know, some designers don't like asking the budget question. I'm a fan of it. I always ask my clients this. Again, I know, Kimberly, you don't ask budget up front, do you? Or do you tell them what their budget, how do you do that? 5, okay, it's step 5. But do you ask them their budget up front? You do, okay, good. Because I know sometimes that was yeah, they lie, exactly, they lie. That's okay though, but at least they give you a number. And what happens if they don't give you, I have no idea. What do you say? What's that? Allison, go for it. Oh, I thought you said, oh, what's that?
Are you okay with $1 million?
Yeah. And by the way, here's the thing. If you've asked all those other questions, you'll know whether that number really is pie in the sky. But you should probably have a good idea. Yeah, and they do already know. And by the way, how many of you have ever gone to get your website quoted and they go, what's your budget for your website? You actually really have no idea, do you? Like you kind of, as soon as they give you a number, you have an idea. But you don't really have a good idea going in unless you've done it 3 or 4 times. So it's not inauthentic, it's just they can't voice it yet. But the minute they hear that number, $250,000, they'll go, yay, or oh my gosh, or oh. And then you can find out about their reaction and why they had that reaction. What are you comparing my services against to think that $250,000 would be too big for this budget? Where did you get that number from? Unreality TV, right? Then you get to finally tell them about how you work, and then you get to book an appointment and charge them for that appointment. You really do want to charge them for that first appointment. Because right away, you start to train them that your time is worth money.